the meeting of April 1st, 2024. Tonight we have one thing on the agenda, which is a review of the First Amendment to the Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan. That's what we have. So over to you, Dustin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have with us Will Norris. Will is an agent of the city's urban renewal agency, call it a family member, although not a pure government city employee. He does urban renewal as call it a sister agency, if you will,
component entity. Yeah.
of the city. And tonight, this is an ask to consider what is known as substantial amendment to the Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan. We'll take you through all the details of this, but in order for this plan and such an amendment to be considered, it is to be heard by the Planning Commission. We will look for the Commission's recommendation or recommendations to City Council, who will have to eventually consider this. The plan amendment doesn't change any of the goals, the outcomes, or intent of the district. What it does is it's actually changing, it's a request to change some of the budget associated with this particular district in the Waterfront District. Will has some other slides and details and some Urban Renewal 101 that will take you through some of the history of this district. What was it intended to do? How has it grown? And what do we intend to do next?
Great. Thank you, Dustin. I'll take it from there. And thank you, Chair Frost, members of the Planning Commission. I really appreciate you coming together with this single item for your agenda. It is a part of a long process, but a required part of the process that we bring this to you, to the Planning Commission, for your review and to collect your recommendations and to forward them on to the City Council, as Dustin said, when they consider an ordinance that will change what's called the maximum indebtedness of the Waterfront District. And I'll go into a little bit more in my presentation about what that means. Bear with me 1 second while I share my screen. Good. So again, yeah, my name is Will Norris. I was the finance director and assistant city manager for the city from 2016 to 2022. Left and then have come back to be squarely focused on urban renewal and be the urban renewal administrator. And this is my first time in all that time talking to the Planning Commission directly. So this is great, and I can appreciate your time. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just on urban renewal in general and the history of the waterfront to give some contextual setting to what we're talking about tonight. I know this isn't a topic that comes before the Planning Commission on a regular basis. So we'll discuss urban renewal and concept, how that concept has actually worked out in practical terms in the waterfront. The issue that we're dealing with right now, which is a large stormwater project on the waterfront, and why that's necessitating a first substantial amendment to the Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan that's before you tonight. So first, just what urban renewal is. It is a mechanism to address the term in state statute is blight in an area, and that probably conjures up images of, you know, inner New York, Chicago, abandoned buildings, trash littering the streets. But really in the rural context, what that means is inadequate infrastructure that's creating a blockage to development. And the way that urban renewal works financially is that property taxes, existing property taxes without any intervention and without any new development grows at 3% per year in Oregon. And that's due to state voter initiatives measures 5 and 50, which created that cap to growth. So what urban renewal does is it stops that in a point in time, freezes the tax base as it is when the urban renewal district is created, and all the existing tax revenue that's generated from what we call the frozen base continues to go to the city, continues to go to the county, continues to go to all the other overlapping districts. that had previously received tax from a designated geographic area. The urban renewal agency then can take the incremental growth of a district, borrow against that revenue stream, same way that you would borrow to buy a car or a house. You're borrowing against future income to make an investment today. And what the goal is to target those areas of blight or those areas of deficient infrastructure or any other blockage that is stopping an area from developing. And then as investments are made, tax increment should grow faster and faster and faster and faster, which allows even more borrowing capacity to do follow-on investments and continue to address issues in a district. And then once the district is built out and we've achieved all of that new development and all that new tax growth, the district is sunsetted and all that new taxable value flows back onto the general rolls, increasing revenue for library, parks, public safety, all the entities that all the normal entities that receive tax. Hopefully leaving a district revitalized and also brand new revenue that wouldn't have otherwise been generated for public services. So that's urban renewal in concept. Now, urban renewal in practice in the waterfront has really been a textbook case, and I'll walk you through. So this is an overhead view of the waterfront district in 1993. See, it's a smattering of industrial buildings. There was the old Expo Center, the wastewater treatment plant that predates all of it, but a lot of empty and open space. Zooming forward a decade to 2004, see, nothing has changed in the built environment of private development. The port had started to build improvements to 2nd Street, but otherwise in a decade, it was identical development in the port. And that was the case as we have a greater interval of overhead shots taken all the way through 2007. I like to show this view down Portway Avenue in 2007, where what would become the waterfront park is an empty field. There's a lot of empty lots. And what I heard was stories that there was an annual cycle race that would do loops around in the port area. There wasn't much else going on. This is the year that the waterfront district as a urban renewal district was created by ordinance. And through that adoption process, that plan came to the Planning Commission in 2008, just as I'm coming to you today for input, recommendations, and approval of the findings that are built into the plan. And as Justin said, none of those findings are being changed tonight. None of the goals are changing either. What we're doing is increasing the amount of money that we're being authorized to borrow to address infrastructure issues. So these were the 7 goals that the plan was meant to address, and it was split up into a budget of $5.75 million of authorized spending. A little over half was dedicated to infrastructure investments, about a third to recreational investments, and then the remainder to habitat improvement, business retention programs, and then contingency and operating overhead. And so up at the top there, that's a graph of the tax base in the waterfront over time. So it was frozen at $11.9 million. And as I walk through kind of the rest of the time, you'll see how that assessed value starts to diverge from the frozen base and also from the 3% growth that was just occurring without any additional development. So by 2009, redevelopment work really started to happen in the waterfront. See, the waterfront park started to be created, and that was with the aid of also state grants and a lot of volunteer support. And the Urban Renewal Agency paid to do a master planning exercise for the interior of the district, planning out how new buildings could be arranged. Then in 2010, we completed odor control improvements on the wastewater treatment plant. Again, I've heard stories from back before this time that the odor was just basically you couldn't stand it to be down in the waterfront for too long, especially if the wind was blowing in the right direction. And people even have told me stories that wind whipping across the settling ponds could splash your car, and you come back with splashes from the wastewater treatment plant on your car. Also, it was just context setting. This was in the depths of the Great Recession. Capital markets were falling apart. We were worried about going into a depression. But with the confidence of this urban renewal district, the Port of Hood River went ahead and built the Halyard building, just a spec building with no tenant lined up. But they took a risk in this really extreme environment to take that first entrepreneurial step towards the development of this district. And obviously, we know now that that's free. The urban renewal district also paid to build Anchor Way, which is highlighted on the map. Now in 2012, we kind of see the picture coming into focus as to what we know the waterfront district to look like today, looking down Portway Avenue. And private investment started to follow on that public investment. Hood Tech building, the Turtle Island plant, what would house the Decline headquarters for a period of time was built, as well as I believe that's where the building where Solstice and 805 is there. All of those then came in right after this kind of entrepreneurial investment, and some of the odor control issues were addressed. And in the graph above, you can really see where assessed value begins to diverge quite rapidly from that kind of stasis it was at before. Continued investments. And then a planning exercise or planning action was taken to do a waterfront overlay zone in 2016. I understand there was a lot of work and a lot of controversy, and really was it coming together in a compromise between a lot of entities to build that, to get that waterfront overlay zone, which created the standards that for additional building in the waterfront area. So those buildings that I had mentioned previously, those were all on port property. And so the port was really an active developer with the other entities, making sure that they built to high standards, really aesthetically pleasing, not just kind of the lowest, cheapest, but for it to continue to develop in such a nice way. This overlay zone was implemented, and just numerous additional requirements that said things like aesthetics and building quality and look and general feel and design of the area. Around that time as well, what would become the Hampton Inn was built by NATO Development, and as part of that development agreement, this urban renewal agency was able to get a hold of Nichols Basin and turn that in and start the active rehabilitation of that natural area, which was once a spot for shipbuilding. The urban renewal agency also did improvements to Portway Avenue, had an angle parking and a bunch of other streetscape improvements. And the Port of Hood River did some additional park and trail connectivity over on the east side of the district. Now in 2016, Portway is looking roughly like what we expect, what we know today, full of people, full of activity, full of business, as well as recreation. In 2018, the last substantial developments were built in the waterfront district. What is now a building that houses Ferment, the Mid-Columbia Medical Center offices, and Shepherd's relocation expansion. And while those were the last major developments that happened in the district, assessed value continued to climb rapidly because a lot of those developments were on what's called an enterprise zone tax abatement. So they had an agreement where they didn't pay any tax for a period of time in exchange for producing a certain number of living wage jobs. So kind of assessed value associated with all of those developments trailed a little bit. But now today, we're approaching 93 million in assessed value for the waterfront district, which is a 780% increase from its original frozen base, and about a 500% increase of what would be expected today if the district hadn't developed and just continued to grow at the measures 5 and 50, 3% limited increase. And so that would have been one to wrap up, throw back onto the overlapping districts, all this additional tax growth, and call it a day, and send this one in to be for the textbooks for urban renewal, except for Sinkhole that began to develop in 2017. And then after a rainstorm, we really collapsed. And this is the stormwater line that runs through the waterfront district. And this is at the base of Hood River Distillers, and became a all hands on deck problem to fix and to reroute the stormwater line. And the origins of the stormwater line problem go all the way back to the 1960s, when the waterfront didn't exist. So it was built with trailings from dam construction. And before that time, all the stormwater from the downtown went through culverts underneath the interstate and railroad, and then just went right out into the river, because that was the banks of the Columbia River. But when the Corps of Engineers built the waterfront district, they had to now the bank of the Columbia River was further out, so they needed to build a stormwater line to get all of downtown's runoff now to the new shore of the Columbia River. And they did that before they knew how streets were going to be laid out, how this was going to be developed at all. And so this is the stormwater line, and you can see it doesn't follow. This was the original stormwater line. You can see it doesn't follow any roadways, goes underneath several buildings. And this is not how you build a stormwater line. You put water, sewer, storm, you put them in the roadway. But there was an intergovernmental agreement with the Port of Hood River that they would ultimately be responsible for relocation of the stormwater line. And so development was permitted and allowed by the city to go over on top. When this collapse happened, the Port of Hood River chose not to take responsibility, and we were left in a situation where we would need to go into legal action to get them to fulfill their responsibilities. Instead, we chose, the Urban Renewal Agency chose to dedicate the remainder of the maximum indebtedness for the waterfront district and put that to this waterfront line. Essentially, that keeps your local government from suing one another, keeps your left pocket from suing your right pocket. Felt the ultimate outcome here is we just need to move this sewer line. So the quickest and easiest way was, we have this very successful waterfront district, we have resources, let's just use the remaining urban renewal monies to do that. So very quickly, we rerouted the stormwater line away from the actively collapsed section. And I believe that happened in 2020 or 2021. Next phase, to relocate the outfall along a property line between the waterfront park and the private development to the west. That just finished up a week or two ago. And there are 2 additional phases left. The next phase really is mostly happening in the downtown area. But what it will do is redirect water to the kind of slough wetland area and actually enhance the wetland aspects of the area between 84 and the railroad, and then let the water naturally move into the basin by the Hook. And the reason why that's needed is, if we could redirect the downtown stormwater, then all the stormwater pipes in the waterfront area could be downsized, because they don't need to take all that extra capacity. And so it actually made the entire holistic project cheaper by doing that redirection of the downtown flow. Also, we could implement a lot of pre-treatment work that is just going to improve the quality of the water as well before it reaches the waterway. And then lastly is to move the last remaining section out from under Hood River Juice and Shepherds and put that into Riverside Drive, and then reconnect all the buildings to this new stormwater line. Which is actually more than just a geographic movement. The old stormwater line was built below the water line of the Columbia, so it nearly spent all of its time totally submerged in water. And only maybe when the Columbia River was at its very, very lowest would it ever see daylight and be inspected. And so this new stormwater line is raised up. So the way I sort of think about it is you built the house, you have your driveway connecting to the street, and then the city comes and raises the street 5 feet and then says good luck. So that's certainly a very expensive part of this too, is helping people potentially reconnect into this raised up system. We did just rely on urban renewal. We got a $500,000 grant from DEQ, $200,000 grant from Business Oregon, about $2.7 million in federal money through the American Rescue Plan Act. But we are relying heavily still to close the gap with Waterfront and the Columbia Cascade Urban Renewal District paying for the downtown portion. Which gets us to about $7.6 billion in total funding. And we're 2 phases into a 4-phase project. It is possible that this may be sufficient to get us through. But unfortunately, we just don't know until the construction bids come in how expensive these final 2 phases are going to be. And since we were in the very last year of the Waterfront District existence, this is our last chance to increase maximum indebtedness, increase the spending capacity of the Urban Renewal District to make sure that this project can move forward timely and without any adverse impacts to citywide ratepayers. So given this information, the Urban Renewal Agency Advisory Committee discussed this. They recommended pursuing a maximum indebtedness increase. That recommendation was then forwarded to the Urban Renewal Agency, who concurred and formally initiated maximum indebtedness increase process, which brings us to where we are today. So the process we're using is specifically outlined in statute and allows us to increase by 20% plus an inflation adjustment. And the math of that comes out to increasing to $7.9 million. So that would be that will allow us to continue tax collection for additional years. And if the project ends up being less expensive, that money can be turned back over to the county assessor to redistribute to all the overlapping districts. So the way I've kind of analogized this is we're buying a insurance policy with this action. We don't know if we're going to need it, but if we do need it, this is our last chance to take out the insurance policy. A lot of people want to know, what does that mean for taxes to the overlapping districts and how long this district is going to last for? Putting that in, I like to start with, what did the original plan expect? So this was the projections that were tax revenue projections that were built into the 2008 waterfront plan that was approved, and how they thought that tax revenues were going to increase and when they thought the district was going to sunset. And the original projections anticipated that the waterfront district would close in 2028. Sorry, that's a little typo on the slide, 2028. This is how tax revenues actually came into the district. And actually, I think contrary to most people's belief, it started out a little slower. And possibly some of that had to do with enterprise tax zone exemptions that I talked about earlier, where we didn't get the money right when developments came in. We got them on a trailing basis. But in 2019, tax increment revenues in the district surpassed budgeted or projections in the original plan. In 2021, we did a we voluntarily ceased division of tax for the for the waterfront district. This was during the kind of the initial months of COVID, when really everything was totally up in the air. We had no idea what was going to happen to local governments, our revenue streams. And we didn't know that there was going to be any federal relief coming. And so we thought we could do our part by at least for 1 year, sending all the tax revenue from the urban renewal districts and releasing that to the overlapping districts. So there was a 1 year pause in 2021. And then the current projections, inclusive of this substantial amendment, increasing the maximum indebtedness, we expect property taxes will dip just a little bit in next fiscal year because we reduced the size of the district, and that was a different action that happened last year. So that's already done. We've already released several of the buildings back to the overlapping districts and the general roles in order to make room for the new West Side district. But with a revised $7.9 million in maximum indebtedness, we will still reach the end of the district 1 year earlier than the original projections in FY27. And that's with only doing a partial collection in FY27. So to some extent, the majority of the district will stop collection in FY26, 2 years ahead of expectations. So this is, but this does require what's called a substantial amendment, quite often used to overhaul a district. The Columbia-Cassidy district that we're in right now has been through 2 or 3 substantial amendments, and that added new projects, new goals, while changing its maximum indebtedness. This substantial amendment before the Planning Commission today is a real targeted substantial amendment. It only changes the maximum indebtedness, does nothing to the goals, purpose, original findings of the plan. Those are remaining unchanged from 2008. But we still have to go through the whole substantial amendment process, which has included passing a resolution, amending the plan, redoing the report accompanying the plan, which is all in your packet, presenting to you tonight and getting your recommendation and bringing that to the city council. Later, we're going to do a citywide notice of the hearing that will go in front of the city council. I'll be giving the same presentation to the Hood River County commissioners to get their recommendation. And we're in the middle of a what's called a meet and confer period, where all the overlapping districts, so the school, the library, Parks District, City County, they all get a notice of this, and they have 45 days to provide us with written comments that have to be reacted to and responded to by the city council before the ordinance can be passed. So the task for the Planning Commission tonight is to forward recommendations to the city council, finding that the original findings in the plan still are in alignment with the city's comprehensive plan, and then provide any suggestions, recommendations that you have that you think the city council should consider before they adopt an ordinance increasing the maximum indebtedness of the waterfront. And there is a suggested motion to that effect in your packet. So thank you for bearing with me through all of that long history. I thought it was good for kind of place setting for tonight's discussion, but with that, I'd answer any questions that the commission may have.
Any questions? Okay, thanks for joining. Raise your hand if you have any questions.
And for the record, Commissioner Hoffman is your urban renewal agency rep, and that the metaphorical crosswalk between the Planning Commission and urban renewal.
Yes, thank you. Well, that was a very informative presentation. I think it was more comprehensive than what we maybe had seen at the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. I can't remember, but I feel like it explains a lot.
Thank you.
So then if I'm recapping, you're gonna be able to pay this 7.9 million back if you need it when you're through the increased assessed values.
Correct. If we need to, if the project demands it, we'll have the revenue source to borrow against, to pay for the project, with, extending the life of the district, a little bit longer, before we release all of this new assessed value to the overlapping districts. If it's not needed, we can return the money, early.
I'm somewhat curious on another note here, just asking, like, what's the latest with lot one? As we look at this area building out, I'm curious how that factors into projections of revenue in the area.
It is not, I'm sorry,
Yeah, and just revenue and assessments in the area, is it factored into these numbers or not?
it is not. There's no assumption as to how lot one will develop in the financial projections in the substantial amendment. We do not rely on an expectation of that developing. And a specific resolution of the Urban Renewal Agency, the one that I referenced earlier that dedicated all remaining urban renewal funds to the stormwater line, essentially precludes us from spending money on lot one, contributing to its development until the stormwater line is done. It gets the first bite of the apple.
Also, for the purposes of lot one generating, it's publicly owned property now. Even if it were to be developed and that real estate valuation were to come online, it's likely to not hit the tax rolls until after this project is already sunset. So you can see Will's projections had 2027, as in even if the MI is increased, really dropping off there, I would expect we would be having a building permit or some process going to see some development there now, even if it were to be completed in that time frame. So the likelihood of it contributing is pretty slim.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? Go ahead.
I'm a little curious as to why the port decided not to take responsibility for the stormwater element of that.
Yeah, I can paraphrase, but take this as secondhand information. Everyone has their own perspectives. Their perspective was that the way that the stormwater line was at the end of its any potential useful life. And so this wasn't a need for relocation. It was a need for just replacement of something that had gone through its useful life. That's not the way that we read the agreement, and I don't think the way that probably it was read when development was allowed to occur over top of the line. That is certainly their contention and what we would have had to slug it out over in court.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, then, any further questions? I will entertain a motion. Anyone is looking at suggested motion?
Make a motion. I move recommending findings that the first substantial amendment to the Hood River Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan continues to conform with the Hood River Comprehensive Plan, and further recommend that the Hood River City Council adopt the proposed first substantial amendments to the Hood River Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor for these findings along to city council. And we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, I will run down the line for a vote. Bonnie?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Eight.
I vote aye.
All right, chair votes aye, motion passes. All right, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the only matter we have on the agenda tonight. Coming to a commission meeting near you in the near future. April 22nd, we will have a code audit before city council to discuss some of the final scoping matters. This is going to be a 2-year process and project, and we will follow up with you sometime after. But that'll be the next big legislative process and project that comes before Planning Commission. So you'll be
So you'll start with, you said.
City council.
City council.
City council. On the 22nd, and then that's really the first debut and public facing part of this. We've had discussions with council before, but this project will really start to get some public notice and public facing direction at that time. So we'll be back to you with some updates after that.
Okay, so no meeting on April 15th, and do we have anything for May 6th?
Nothing yet for May 6th. We are still in the window where we could have an appeal, but we don't expect anything for April.
Do you have a ballpark on when we might be meeting for the code audit?
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I think sometime in the summer.
All right. Kate, any questions from you?
None here.
All right, thanks. With that, I will adjourn the meeting at 6:05. All right, thanks very much.